All right. So, I'm Travis. I've been in the industry for about 3 years. I close about 20 plus deals a year, 25 deals a year. And I just wanted to come with you today with.
Afton. I've been in the industry since 2018. I close between 25 and 35 deals a year, and I've been with Redfin since 2018.
We wanted to chat with you today about the news that's going on in the industry with all the commissions and all that fun stuff that's happening. And I figured the best way to do this is just have a conversation and address the items that are very confusingly worded, I feel, and kind of go from there and maybe dispel some of the rumors that are kind of going around and really just kind of get to the root of like, this is what's going on and how does it actually impact you and what are the unknowns and all those different things. So I figured we would start. Afton found a really fun stat.
So I was told by a colleague this morning that 75% of buyers don't know how their agent is paid, which is really interesting considering we wouldn't be getting paid if we weren't working with them.
And from a buyer standpoint, we were kind of chatting about this before we started. You tell your clients how your as a buyer's agent are paid, and I usually don't communicate that with them, right? Unless it kind of comes up in discussion.
Well, to this point in the market, I think it's unusual, and I can't think of another industry that's similar, where we are paid by our competition. So after we successfully negotiate a contract, the seller pays the buyer's agent at closing. The seller is actually responsible to pay both agents. So I've always told my buyers, kind of jokingly, because I think it makes it memorable, I am a free service to you provided by somebody we've not met yet, and we have no idea who it could be. And until that point, we're just working together in good faith, hoping you buy a house.
And I think that is a good point to maybe start kind of like letting our clients know, like, where's the compensation coming from? And I think I could personally do a better job about educating our clients about that. Does it impact the deal? Probably not, but I think it gives a better perspective. And it gives you a perspective as we kind of dive into this of where some of the compensation is coming from and where some of the pitfalls that have come into the industry have happened. I think one of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about was the article that came out that everyone saw that saying the 6% commission is dead, which I mean, as you know, with Redfin, that hasn't really been a thing.
I mean, we've not ever done a 6% commission. So for us, it was never alive. So hard to kill something that just wasn't here. I think to say that it's dead is an overstatement. There's still brokerages, I think, that are going to push it. I think there's still sellers that are going to be traditionalists and say, this is what I need to do to sell my house. I think this is a thing that could take a lot of time to evolve. But I think the 6% commission's dead? No.
I think there's going to be different ways that it's going to come about where either the buyer is going to have to start paying their agent, right? Because traditionally it's been, the seller is agreeing to pay a commission to the buyer's agent. Maybe the buyer is going to pay for that. I think it's important to note, and that's what I think the confusing part for a lot of folks is Redfin has always done that 1.5% listing fee, which I always tell folks that's half, if not more than half, of what other agents are doing, because they're always going to come and say, this is the line that I heard so many times, I'm worth 3%. Now let's figure out what we're going to pay the buyer's agent, is what I have heard from other agents outside of Redfin. Well, Redfin is we're only going to charge you 1.5%, and we're going to literally give you everything else that they're going to give you, doing the same exact thing. So
we all have access to the same MLS.
The same exact stuff, right? And most of the time, my buyers, they're finding these homes on Redfin or Realtor.com or Zillow.
Which is all, again, populated by the MLS. So one thing you're paying your realtor for, if you're a seller, is to get you listed in the MLS, the multiple listing service, so that your home and your listing is syndicated across all of these websites. We all have access, we all pay the same fee, and something we do at Redfin, I mean, we do a Matterport scan for every house, we use professional photography, we write a beautiful listing description for you, and then we put you into the MLS and you go everywhere. So if somebody's saying by working with Redfin you're not getting any of those things, it's just inaccurate. So I would like to set that stage from the beginning. We do the same thing as everybody else, just for less, and we're doing it successfully.
And I think that's the big thing. And not to be like, you know, the point isn't to like Redfin's the greatest in the world. I think the point is to say, if we're charging 1.5% and we're doing all of that, if not more, then it's okay. Like, why are you paying that 3%? And I think that's the biggest disconnect from a sell side, right? We're already giving less on these commissions. Now, I think the biggest like boiled down, and I wanted to address like, okay, so yes, the commissions are going away. Well, like, what is actually happening? And I think that's one of the biggest things that I wanted to touch on. Like, what are the changes being made, and who do they impact, and how do they impact you? And as of right now, the only changes that are being made is, so on the MLS, so when we put your listing on the MLS, we'll put on there what you've agreed to pay the buyer's agent if they come and bring you an offer and the deal goes through and is closed. You're agreeing to pay that buyer's agent a specific percentage. Well, that's going away. So they're removing that altogether from the MLS. And then they're also making a change where, as a buyer's agent, so if you say, hey, I want to go look at that home, so if you're a buyer, now you need to sign an agency agreement with your agent before you go tour that home. Those are the two changes that are being made, and obviously those could change.
So I think that's really interesting that you're making a contractual commitment to somebody that you've never met potentially. Certainly we have sphere and referral clients that we might have met before we go show them a home. But I would say a lot of times the first time you're meeting somebody is in the driveway of a house. And now we're saying you need to have a contract in place before you do that. A couple quick things. There are agents that have done this for years. And I will say, in my experience, it's made a lot of buyers uncomfortable to contractually commit to somebody with a contract they're not familiar with and they don't know how easily they can break before you've even met somebody. Would you agree to let a plumber redo your kitchen before you'd even had them over for a consult? Would you hire any other vendor that way? Granted, the buyer's agency agreement is very easily terminated. Just has to be done so in writing. But it's a lot of paperwork for both parties to just go into it kind of with that attitude of, well, if we don't like each other, just send me an email that you want to break contract.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because there has been times where I've gone on a tour with somebody, then they've been on the fence and like literally just sitting there in the kitchen. Usually that's where we have those conversations. They're like, that's super helpful. I'm just going to use you, right? Well, now we're removing that aspect and saying, we'll sign this before we go out, right? So I don't have that opportunity, because I mean, the whole thing is I want to show my value and my worth and give you valuable information. And now we're saying we're going to try to bypass that. And I'm still going to give that value and that worth, but now we're just saying, hey, sign this agreement before we go under contract, or before
We've even seen a home.
We've even seen a home. We've even stepped through the threshold. So,
which you can certainly say, hey, we're gonna go see some homes Saturday. Do you have time to go to Starbucks or coffee shop or whatever beforehand? And we can chat and make sure we're a good fit for each other, because I'm gonna need you to sign a contract. But at that point, again, these buyers just want to go see these homes. So is it something they'll just commit to, saying like, well, I want to go see that house? Or are they going to say this is super weird and now I don't want to go see these homes?
And I think what you're hearing from us is there's like a bunch of different ways that the industry can go. And right now, we're just trying to figure this out along with you, right? But I think the biggest thing is to kind of give a perspective of like what's changing, and and it could go like a bunch of different directions. I think the biggest one being the commission aspect, right, where you're saying, well, all you're doing is not printing the commission on the MLS, and that has big implications, right? Um, there, I think the issue, kind of boiling it down, like what was happening. I think agents, and we kind of chatted about it a little bit before. I think agents were going to their listing consults and they were saying, here's what my commission is. Let's agree upon that, right? I'm going to sell your house for 3% or 3.2%. And then you're going to agree to pay 2.8% to the buyer's agent.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't a discussion about that. And I've always had the discussion of, this is what all our comps have offered in that commission. What do you feel comfortable with? Here's the pros, here's the cons, where do you want to go? I've done listings at 2% commission and different things like that. And I think there's pros and cons, and we could kind of talk about it, but ultimately it's always your choice. And I feel like in the past, people haven't had that choice.
So what I think is interesting is the way that we were trained to do listings with Redfin is there is no standard commission that a seller should be paying a buyer's agent. And to call it that is price fixing, right? And that's kind of this whole NAR thing. So we've been talking about this for years. So I've always asked my sellers, what would you like to pay a buyer's agent? And after they say nothing and we laugh, we really talk about it. And they say, well, what is considered standard? And I say, well, in Denver, this is what I frequently see. We can go above that. We can go below it. We might get pushback. In buyer's agency agreements, a lot of agents have in there that they get paid a minimum amount, and that minimum can be either a percent or a dollar amount. And for most agents, it is 2.8%. And they tell their buyers from the beginning, if I don't get 2.8% from the seller, you're making it up. And the buyer signs that. So that's tough. And, that is information that I have shared with sellers, that this is where you might get pushback because, say this is a first-time home buyer's home, they may not have, if you're offering 2% and their buyer's agent says, I must make 2.8, they may not have that extra 0.8% to give to their agent. And so they may go see something else, which I think is unfair to everybody but that buyer's agent.
And I think this is where there's like a fork in the road, and there's a bunch of different directions that we could go, and we just don't know the full scope of how the industry is going to shape out. And I think the biggest thing is just kind of talking about some of the different avenues that we could go down, and then as we have more information, we can update you and let you know, like, hey, this is how things are starting to move. But I think the biggest one being, our buyer is going to come out and say, I don't want to be represented. I just want to go to the listing agent and have the listing agent handle both sides of the transaction, right? Because that could be unrepresented buyers just going to the listing agent. Now, the listing agent is probably going to get paid on both sides of that, right?
Depending on their contract with their seller, yeah.
Depending on their contract, right? But that could be one of the avenues that it go down. I think there's like some negatives for that, because we call that in Colorado, we call that transaction brokerage, where we're basically just facilitating the contract.
So can we talk about some negatives to being a transaction broker?
Yes.
Okay, so transaction broker means that you are a neutral party. So let's talk about how, with the human condition, and that, we have relationships with each other and biases, that this is actually, is it possible to be truly neutral? I would say no. I mean, so if I go to Travis's house and I say, let's talk about selling your home and what are your plans? And I know that now he's selling his house and he's going to go buy something else with me. And we're building a rapport. We have a relationship. So we sign an agency agreement that I'm his listing agent, he's my seller, right? Well, then Joe Buyer comes along and says, I've bought 1 million homes. I don't think I need an agent. Can you just do my paperwork? So I have to go back to Travis and say, hey, do you want me to be neutral and treat you both as just a customer and no longer have an agency agreement? Is one way we could handle this. And at that point, I'm not really able to give anybody my advice, my opinions, which is interesting because it's a hard thing to just completely remove yourself from a situation. And again, you're not meant to have a bias, but you're probably going to be biased towards the person that you were originally working towards, assuming you haven't bullied me through the whole transaction. Who knows? Maybe I do like Joe Buyer better.
Yeah, you've been kind of difficult. I'm going to work with
I
them
might
more.
like that guy better. You can also just say that Travis is still my seller, and I'm treating Joe Buyer as a customer and somebody I have no brokerage relationship with. But again, you can't give that person any advice or opinions, even just on the contract. It's a matter of how do you want me to fill it out? And we went through real estate school. We have to take continuing education. We took licensure exams. We know the contract. Does Joe Buyer? Is this really in his best interest to not have an agent? Maybe Joe Buyer's bought 10 houses and is fine, but what about the first-time home buyers who now this whole thing could really negatively impact them?
I think I get often, because buying real estate is confusing, I get often a first-time home buyer who comes to me and says, I'll explain a situation and I'm saying, all right, how would you like to proceed? And they're like, well, I don't know. Like, what am I supposed to do here?
Mm-hmm.
And what I can do is then that's where the break happens. Say, you'll have to advise family and friends, maybe. Like, I can't advise you any farther, but what, as your agent, I can sit down with you and say, hey, this is what I see a lot of times. This scenario doesn't come off, up that often. Kind of giving different scenarios and different ways that a situation could play out. But that's kind of advising them and kind of going above and beyond writing a contract and facilitating a deal. That I think is super valuable to first-time homebuyers who do this. I think it's valuable to anybody because, we do this 20 to 30 times a year. We do this. And I would say most people do this once every 5 to 10 years. And so it changes. Obviously, as it's changing right now, it changes from year to year. There's changes to the contract. So I think it's super valuable to be able to give anecdotal information to people.
I agree. Even just, I've had buyers come back to me after 2 years, and it can be a big change in the market in the span of 2 years.
And so I think, so that is one aspect and one avenue we could go down where we're changing it to buyers are coming to listing agents unrepresented. I don't think that's going to happen because of the things that we kind of talked to you about. I think most people are going to see the value of an agent regardless. So then it comes down to, well, how do they get compensated? If a seller doesn't want to pay them, it's similar to a for sale by owner. They're just using an agent, right? Mm-hmm. But they're saying, I'm not going to pay the other side. Well, where does that come from? And this is where it can get difficult for a buyer's agent, because now they're going to have to negotiate that commission in there, right? So let's say it's a multiple offer situation. We've got multiple offers where we're negotiating price and the contingencies in the deal and all those different things. But now we're throwing another element in there where we're negotiating a commission in there. So how does this all play out? And I think that that's the tough part. And I think that Redfin in particular is positioned to kind of handle this because we're already, like we're trying to, like what they say, change, disrupt the industry, right? We're trying to change the industry in the consumer's favor, right? So if it's a 1% commission, cool. Everyone saves, right? So I think that there is some changes, and I think you're going to get a lot of flat fee folks. But this is where it gets muddy. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I do think it gets really muddy because I think there's a couple of ways it could go. Personally, I think the most likely scenario is that we eliminate from the seller's agency agreement what a seller is willing to pay a buyer's agent, and it becomes negotiable. And I think a line will be added to the contract buy and sell that allows the buyer and their agent to put in what they expect to be paid. And I think it's going to be factored into offers, and it's going to factor into the net. I think that's a line that might be coming into my offer spreadsheets, and we can say, this buyer is offering this, and this is what their compensation is going to be. This buyer is offering this, and this is their compensation. And we wind up seeing what the net on different things is. Travis and I talked about yesterday, this could have really great implications for sellers. A lot of times when a realtor buys their own home, they get paid to do so, which is kind of funky. It's weird that you're being paid by a seller to buy your own house. So it might become more common to see that waived completely. Or at least that it's more transparent to a seller that they would be paying this person. I always put it on my offer spreadsheet, like this is a realtor, they're not lowering their commission at all. And on a lot of contracts when we bought, I tried to lower my commission. I tried to not use myself as an agent. I wanted the agent to treat me as a customer so that I wouldn't have to get paid. It would have added a lot of value to my offers. But at the time, I think it created a lot of confusion, which is just funky.
So I think that there is, the good part about it, right, is it helps create a good negotiating tool from a standpoint of like, I think every agent's going to have a minimum and say, look, I need to break even and I need to be able to net this to kind of, make it profitable, right? We're in this, I love to do real estate, but we also get paid for it, right? This is how we put food on the table. So we are going to have minimums and everything like that. But if an agent comes and say, I get paid 2.8%, and another agent's going to come in and say, I'll take 1.5 because I know that I can be profitable and it makes this situation work, right? They're obviously going to do that because that has a lot of money and savings for a seller.
Well, if everything else on the offer is equal, you mean?
Yeah, if everything else is equal on that offer, and then basically that agent that was saying I get paid 2.8% is gonna have to go back to their buyer and say, look, we lost the deal because of my commission. And I think that is the tough conversation that some agents are gonna have to kind of get over, right? Like it's not being a discount broker. And I think I've heard that term quite a bit, right? I get paid 2.8% because I'm not a discount broker. Well, I you know what I mean? Like, I think it's okay to get paid less than that, right? Are you
serving your buyers, or are you serving yourself?
Yeah. So you're going to be making money on that deal, right? Will agents get paid less per transaction? Yes. Is that an okay thing? Yes, that is completely okay. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to get rid of some of the more traditional agents that have traditionally gotten 2.8% or 2.5%, and they're going to just say, I don't want to do this anymore. So I think it's going to create maybe less agents in the industry overall.
Well, I think it's going to become more about value. So say, and we can talk about the other direction it could go a little bit, where either instead of negotiating it into the offer, what if the buyer is responsible for paying their agent now? So it might be something you discuss up front and say, this is what I expect to be paid for completion. at this point in the game, like I said in the beginning, you know, we get paid by a stranger and we're working together in good faith, hoping you buy a house. Most agents do not get paid at all until that happens. So there is something in our buyer's agency that allows for hourly pay. So are we going to become more like attorneys and have a retainer and, you know, have billable hours, that kind of thing? Who knows? But
I
I
hadn't even thought about that.
yeah.
That's
Oh,
a
my
whole
mind's
other
been
one.
like buzzing with some of this stuff.
And this is like where we're just sitting here, like we don't know.
We
what
don't
it's
know.
about.
I think realistically, if buyers do wind up paying their agent, it's going to become about value. You know, you find people that say, well, I've got a cousin who's an agent, so I want to do them a favor and let them be my representation. Well, if your cousin hasn't done a deal in 6 years, is that really your best value? Or do you want somebody who is a full-time realtor? Is that your better value? You know, if your cousin says, I'll do it for free, great, but can they get you under contract? So I think that's a consideration as well. There's all these estimates about who's going to drop out of the industry, and it is the people that do 0 to 4 deals a year. I think there's a lot of folks out there that say real estate is going to be my get rich quick scheme. I've been doing it 6 years and I'm not rich yet, so fail. But I think those folks are going to say, if I don't know what I am going to get paid, is it worth it for me? Because it's not free to be a realtor. Like I said, we went through real estate school. We did our licensure. We have insurance. We have to take classes. We pay to be part of the MLS. You pay to be part of a realtor association. You pay to be part of NAR, which Redfin quite famously recently left NAR. But in some markets, like Denver, you have to be a member of NAR to be able to access the MLS. None of this stuff is free. So is somebody that does it part-time on the weekends, hopes to close 1 or 2 deals a year, is the money going to be there for them anymore? And I would say no.
Well, and I think that's a good point, right? Where I think that experience factor is huge, right? If we do quite a bit of deals, and we're, you know, obviously, I wish I could say I win 100% of the offers that I write, which I don't.
I win 110%.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'm apparently not doing what you're doing. But I will say that we're writing these offers that are, and there's so much value into like losing an offer as well, right? Because
I think it can be valuable for your buyers to see. Sometimes you want to see what you can get away with, and sometimes you get away with it, and sometimes you don't.
but even like this year, so let's just take from like December to January 5th this year. I was writing offers the end of December that were under list price with a seller concession, and we were winning. And then January 5th hit, and then all the listings were going over list price,
No concessions.
no concessions, all these. But that change happened so quick. And is that person who does this once for free going to know? And it could have major implications on you winning the perfect home or overpaying on a home that you really like, right? So we kind of are in the industry every single day. So I think there's a huge value in that. And I think that's where people are going to want an agent because that is working for them. Right? We're not a transaction broker. We can kind of work for them. And I don't know. I think it's awesome. I think the biggest win I have is when I can get a client into the house they want under price.
Yeah.
If I can get them a smoking deal, I feel like a super huge sense of accomplishment. And I think that like you kind of are getting rid of some of that if you do the transaction brokerage, or if you're using an agent that doesn't do this all the time. I don't know. You can.
So some of my thoughts on that, you know, real estate's cyclical and seasonal, and you and I understand that, and most agents understand that. If you aren't able to compete, when's the best time for you to buy? Is it going to be March? Probably not. And if you are determined to buy in spring but you can't compete, what are the tips for still getting into a home? You know? And that's something we know. And I understand you guys all have the Google machine, but Google can't tell you everything.
The AI portion.
And I do listings and I work with buyers. I think it gives me valuable insight into the market as a whole, versus only doing one of those two. And I have seen agents that are like very clearly out of touch in both directions. I've seen after kind of the craziness of 2020 and 2021 died out, you know, I'd still have people, first folks in the door on my listing, submitting an offer right away, 50,000 above, which is great. We're excited for it. But as far as that buyer's concerned, was it necessary? You know, like Travis said, you know, you want to get your buyers in the door, but you don't want them to spend a penny more than they have to. So when a house is listing at a slow time of year and you're coming in the door and you're writing a ridiculous offer, is that fair? You know, do you want to pay Neiman Marcus prices at Target? Because that's what happens.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you get agents that think it was last fall when rates were really high, and to your point of below list offers with concessions. You know, somebody says, I've got 7 offers on my listing, and you get something where they say, well, we're going to go 20 below, but we also want a 2-1 buy down. Was that good advice to their buyer? No.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think it just shows the value of what an agent does bring to the table. Were the commissions maybe too high? I don't know. I think I hope we explain that there's a lot of upfront costs that we do, and we're out there working with you, and then providing. So there is like a cost factor of like the MLS and, you know, being a part of the association, but then there's that other factor of like that continuing education. That's just time on our part. Sometimes it costs something. Sometimes it's just, you know, provided from like title companies. But there's that education that we're putting in that time, and then we're kind of conveying that information to you, and how does it actually pertain. So then there's like, I learned it, now let's practice it, and that information is super valuable. So there's not a quantifiable dollar amount on that, but I think that there is it's super valuable, right? Because you go to the professionals to ask for their opinions. Like you go to like a designer that's like, I want to spend money on this, but I don't know what to do, and like they'll give you their opinions and experience. Like, hey, if you want to design your kitchen this way, I wouldn't recommend doing that because of this. Like, some valuable information. So I think that is, I don't know. I think it's hard to put a dollar amount on it, but I do think it's good that it is changing as a whole. And I guess I wanted to kind of just wrap it up, unless you had any other thoughts on anything.
No, I mean, just that it's all really new information. We are looking at changing a system that has historically been slow to change. I welcome the change. I think Redfin's been trying to disrupt the industry for 20 years or so. We've always done things a little bit differently. We try to be more in the consumer's favor. And I think that's the way the market is trying to move. We just don't have clear direction as to what that looks like. There's just a lot of sensationalized headlines.
And I think the headline was good because it got people talking. And I think that's an important thing. But we also want to provide context to what that means. And then also put in perspective like where Redfin has always stood, where we've always been giving these breaks in these commissions, right? And I think that has always been our stance. And I think that maybe I think there's a small population of agents, maybe more. I try to see the good in people that that this has been an issue. It's obviously been a big issue. NAR settled a $6 billion lawsuit at $500 million because people were doing bad stuff.
And I would like to point out that was just for sellers. There's more lawsuits out there about buyers that feel like they were overcharged.
So we as real estate agents, and this is like obviously another little tangent, but we take a code of ethics that we're supposed to follow, and I take that stuff very seriously, and I know you take that stuff very, and Redfin takes that very, very seriously. Maybe some agents weren't doing that, and that's why we're here. I don't want to downplay the situation because it is a $500 million lawsuit.
Yeah.
There was some bad stuff going on. But I think it's overall, this is a good shakeup that needs to happen. And I think which way it goes, we can update you down the road. But I think at this point, that's kind of where we're at, and providing some context, and feel free to reach out to either of us for any questions.
It's a fun topic of conversation for us right now.
Awesome. All right. Well, reach out to us if you have any questions. But that's kind of where we're at, and maybe we'll do this again as we get more information. I think it would be helpful if more than 3 people watch this. All right. We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye, guys.